Hi, folks. Jennifer Nelson here, founder of Scout Real Estate. Glad you're listening in. I created Pocket Hours podcast to elevate our game and help us all learn from the best. I have interviewed some of the top producers in our industry about best practices, among many other things. We also tackle industry issues and changes with great conversation from many of our leaders. And the best part is you get clock hours just for listening in. After you have listened to 3 episodes, just email info@scoutrealestate.com to answer a few easy questions for the interview, and you will receive your certificate. Meanwhile, enjoy listening and learning, and go out there and be the agent you would hire. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited because I just had a really great conversation. In fact, Shannon from Audiotocracy, who is the production company that does this, agreed with me. She said, man, that was one of the best ones you had. Because Shawna Ader was on the show. She is in the top 0.05% producers in our state. She just kicks it, knocks it out of the park. But what I appreciated most about this conversation was her ability to speak from a place of saying, here's how I got to this level of success. And they're really simple things. They're not, elaborate business plans. They're keeping in touch with your clients and flow and starting a book club and staying consistent. If anything in here came out, it's consistency. But my other favorite part about this conversation was Shawna weighs in on what's happening in our industry around Compass and private exclusive listings. For anyone that wants to know, sort of someone who can see this big picture from 30 years of doing this, she really encapsulates what's wrong with this in a very practical way and exposes sort of why we want this to go away. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. She said at the end when we finished it that she felt like she was sitting in our living room having a glass of wine with a friend. That is my goal every time, that we get to have an easy conversation, and hopefully it's easy for you to listen to and learn something. So have fun listening. And I'm super excited that I twisted the arm of Shawna Ader to be on our podcast today. Didn't have to twist too hard. She was willing to come and sort of share with us her wisdom. Shawna, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Jennifer. I don't know if you remember, but you asked me a few years ago and I said yes, and then we never finalized it. So when you asked again, I was honored that you even came back and tried to do this. So thank you.
You're welcome. I appreciate your time. I want to just say for our listeners, I don't know if even Shawna knows this. I usually surprise our high producers on the show, but in looking at Shawna's numbers, she is in the 0.05% of all brokers in Washington State. So she is kicking ass and taking names. And I just want to congratulate you for your success. And we're going to get into that and how you got it. But good job.
Thank you,
I'm being
Jennifer.
so good at what you do.
I try not to look at the numbers. So
That's true. It's so funny, of all the high producers we've been interviewed over the last couple of years, they all say that. They're like, am I? Who knew?
yeah.
They're putting their head down and working hard. So tell us, Shawna, let's start at the beginning. That's kind of the most fun part, is to say, who was Shawna before she was a real estate agent? What were you doing? Do you have family, pets? What's going on for you? Tell us a little bit about you.
Shawna before real estate. It's funny. My husband usually asks me about life before Shawna. So it's kind of he calls it BS, life before Shawna. So life before real estate was really college. I aspired to be an attorney. I have a degree in psychology and philosophy with an emphasis in logic. And that was preparing me to go to, to take the LSAT and go to law school. I got a job after college, like most people did. I went to Seattle U in Seattle, and I came from a very small town in rural Oregon. So big city change, came up from a town of 6,000 to the city of Seattle in the late 80s, early 90s, height of the grunge era. It was awesome. I got to see Mudhoney down at the Showbox in Pioneer Square when I was a kid. And, after graduated with this degree in psychology and philosophy, thought I would go to graduate school or law school. And I got a real job. And it was funny because I had a choice to take a job with a company called Team Marketing and Plan Sales, which was like an admin. It's what everybody did, after college. Like you went to one of these recruiters and you got a $40,000 a year big girl job. And I had a choice. I could go to this Team Marketing and Plan Sales, or I could go to this company that was way out in the sticks. It was called Microsoft. And I picked Team Marketing and Plan Sales, which is hysterical and a huge mistake, but whatever. I am where I am. And so I went to work for this company, and then I had taught swimming lessons in college. So one of my parents from the kids I taught swimming lessons asked me to come to work for his company. And that was leather care on Elliott Avenue. Who knew?
Wow.
And so he's like, you'd be a good manager. And it turns out I'm not a good manager. And we'll get into that later. But I went to work for him. And through that company, I met a woman named Diane Akana, and she happened to be Terry Allen's real estate assistant.
Yes.
And she said, hey, my sister works for a real estate company and they're looking for an office manager. And I had this little bit of management experience. And so I was like, sure, I'll do that. So it was in Madison Park. It was a small company called Madison House and the Dover Group. And Madison House was this great collection of really iconic, old school, the OG real estate agents from that era. It was like Kitty Hughes and Joanne Greeley and Jean Virick and
Mm.
Ann Dover and
Oh
all
my
these
gosh.
names, Jennifer, that are like, right? These are
Yes.
like,
Yes.
this was the glass ceiling of real estate in the 19, that they just crushed. Carol Burns.
What year are we talking?
I got my license in 1996. So it's been almost 30 years now. And then I met the Bobs and I met Bob Benyon and Bob DeVille. I managed the Dover Group and I was managing the business, but I had to get my license because to cover the admin assistant over lunch, you had to answer the phone, monitor the fax machine.
And
Um,
just for our millennials that are listening, we don't know what a fax machine is, but we'll
right.
we'll leave that for you to Google later. So yeah, okay.
And the books and the real estate books, which have come up recently, which we'll get into later as well, come up recently in conversation. So that was the start of it. So it was really an accidental career. And I did the admin piece of it. I did the business management piece of it for a few years. And there was kind of a transition in the company, and the Bobs ended up going to Windermere. And that was a group of the people that had been at the Dover Group went to the Lakeview office. And that was like Linda Tallahan and the Catherines and and these were all basically the luxury brokers in the Windermere market. I was just on the job learning. It was just an immersion. It's like when you learn a foreign language, right? You're immersed in it. You have to learn it. I had my hands on hundreds of transactions,
Wow.
got to see how they interacted. So it was really like a graduate degree in real estate, just, on the job.
That's amazing. I love that all these names are coming up. I'm just like, yep, yep, I remember those people. That's so cool. You talk about your degrees in psychology with, and some logic and how, I mean, I wrote it down just because I'm thinking, man, that must serve you really well now. I mean, I have my master's in counseling and can't think of a better master's to have for what we do with dealing with people and sort of understanding where they're coming from and motivations and trying to help them process information, usually right now at a quick speed. So, how have you found that degree influencing your career now?
I mean, I think a lot of us will say all we are is counselors. I mean,
Hmm.
that's really what we do on a daily basis. And I think moving your business model to a, trusted advisor role, more like a financial advisor, and dovetailing that with the counseling, because it's not just stocks. You live in your asset, or you are selling your asset, or you're gaining an asset that you live in. It's such a personal business for people. It is beyond personal. It's the core of who we are as a human, especially, people that nest in their houses, which most of us do. I always talk with buyers about being on the spectrum of a purely investment buyer or a purely emotional buyer. And I say the purely emotional buyers are my artists who are buying houseboats, right? Like there's no fiscal decision there. It's just it's
Feels good. I
yes, it
like it.
feels
Yeah.
good. And I want to be in the light. And then there's the purely investment buyer who is just looking at the numbers. And I like people to be somewhere in the middle, but I enjoy the counseling piece of it. I will say I didn't enjoy it in the downturn. We were doing a lot of counseling of people that were in pain and suffering, but I often relate buying or selling a house to the stages of grief. I mean, that was probably one of the biggest ones, the stages of grief and, denial. People were in denial in the downturn that they were going to lose money. And it took them a while to get through those stages. So, yeah, it's absolutely a help, Jennifer.
Absolutely. I just it triggered me to think about I have a client right now and no offense to men in any way, I love men. He is a 30-year-old man and this has happened several times in that age group where I lead them through the process. We win in a multiple offer. He gets the house and he calls me a couple of days later in tears. How do I get out of this? I can't believe I did this, right? Afraid of commitment, sort of talking him through. You didn't marry the house. You're just dating it seriously. You can end this relationship. Don't worry. Right. So this commitment thing and sort of what did I do? So yes, to your point of stages of grief, absolutely. And now, a week later, we're at acceptance. We're at,
Yeah.
like he's buying the house. So, but yes, so I love that you said trusted advisor too, because people say, "Oh, what got you into sales?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm not in sales.
Oh God. I have a no soliciting sign on my front door. I hate
Yeah,
sales.
I'm not in sales. I don't do sales at all. We don't sell the product. It's not what we do."
We sell ourselves to some extent when we're in a competition situation, but I always say to people it's hard to sell yourself, especially for people that are not numbers people or the ego broker. I go back to the ninja training that we've all had and it's like I'm not the ego broker. I don't do this because I want to collect stats or numbers. I do it because I want to help people. And that goes back to the counseling piece of it. So
For sure, for sure. So you're working as a manager, you got your license to be able to answer the phone. When did you actually step into, I'm going to do this full time. I'm going to do real estate myself.
99, and it was the year I got married. And there's a funny backstory there that I would be remiss if I didn't say. So when I was a manager, the company had a policy where licensed individuals that were not full-time salespeople, that were like salaried people, could sell two houses a year and not pay a split. And it was designed so that if you had a friend or a family member that you wanted to help, you could do that. This is not a retro podcast. It could be if we go in here, but our office had just gotten DSL. And again, you millennials are going to need to Google what DSL is, but we got DSL and we had AOL as our internet browser because that was how we interfaced with the internet. And
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And so AOL had this thing called Instant Messenger, and it was basically like a chat program. And so I would spend my days managing this office, like with the AOL window open. And some guy approached me and was like, "Hey, I can see in your profile that you're a real estate manager. Can I ask you some questions? Because I keep going to these open houses and people are just slimy and like, I don't want to get solicited. And I just have real estate questions." And so we started chatting on AOL, and I ended up breaking the golden rule of online dating. And I met him at his apartment.
Oh,
We
no.
celebrated our 26th wedding anniversary last week. So
That's amazing. I love that you met him on AOL Messenger. That's just perfect.
when my husband asks how we met each other, he goes, "Oh, the old fashioned way online." So
That's great. Congratulations, by the
thank
way.
you. He was my first real estate sale. And we actually just sold that house last year that he bought as well.
Oh, my word.
I don't know why I digressed and told you that story, but so that was my first sale and my first
Yeah.
toe dip in real estate. And I was like, you know what? I could do this. When we had this transition in the office and the Bobs went to Windermere and Andover stayed behind at the Dover group, which got absorbed by Madison House, I had a choice to make. The opportunity that real estate agency or brokerage provided me was kind of unlimited. And I came from a family that had entrepreneurial parents. So my dad is a small business owner. My mom had done small businesses. So I kind of had that mindset. My husband, on the other hand, did not. He came from a family of teachers, educators and state EPA workers. So he was like, "What are you talking about? You're not going to make a salary and you have to pay your own insurance. What are you doing?"
Hmm.
Like, no.
Bad decision. Yeah.
And I was like, "Nope." So I set up my desk in that little house that he bought because we ended up, sleeping together after the inspection and and all
I
that.
love it.
And so and I did it. I went out on my own.
Best inspection ever.
Yes, right. I still dabbled in assistant work and management work. I actually went down to Palm Springs when the Bobs opened their Coachella Valley offices. I went down there for 6 weeks and helped them open offices. So I had my fingers in so many different pieces of real estate. And I'm a she who dies with the most information wins kind of girl. Like I have to know everything before I'm able to do something. And so I felt like I had the skill set. But of course, it was a huge leap of faith. The way I explained it to him was, look, I can go from making $40,000 a year to $400,000 a year, and it's going to be difficult, and I've got to work at it, and I need your support, but we can do this. So that was kind of the beginning.
Amazing, amazing. So take us back for the people that are listening to this that are brand new in this industry and they're saying 40,000 would be amazing if I made that, right? Like they're really worried about it. Talk about the first couple of years of your career. How did you get going? What did you do to sort of start to get some stable income coming in?
It was a grind. I did everything and anything. When people come to me and ask, like, how do you start? How do you do it? My best advice is to sidle up to, remember the Seinfeld sidler, sidle up to as many successful brokers as you possibly can and offer to help them, not for payment, not to get paid $200 to do an open house, not to,
Hmm.
but make yourself invaluable to people that you admire, to people that you aspire to be, and learn that way. Because at some point, there will be a moment in my life and Jennifer's life, in X, Y, or Z, a successful broker's life, where they go, I need help. And the way they're going to reach out to you is if they remember you because you helped them. So I wrote marketing copy. I happened to be good at writing marketing copy. And so a couple of those agents that I worked for, Carol Burns, she hated it. She hated paperwork and marketing copy. So I was like, great, I'll do your paperwork and marketing copy. And lo and behold, she went on vacation to Mexico and she had a client selling a house in Broadmoor. And she's like, I need you to go take this contract over to them at Park Shore and get it signed around. She trusted me to handle a contract when she was on vacation. I wasn't looking to get paid for it. I'm not here to be like kids these days kind of a thing. But I think so many younger brokers come into this thinking there's got to be an angle for me to make money off of an agent. And I get that. You look at the numbers and you're like, wow, that person must make $1 million a year or 400, whatever, a lot of money a year. They must have some left over for me. They might not understand that my monthly burn is a tenth of that. That is a lot of money that we spend to maintain a business that rolls along at this level.
I think it's interesting though, because you're talking, in my opinion, to what is a mindset around growth and learning and understanding that if you're starting in this business, what you want to do and what Shauna did and what a lot of these high producers that I am talking to over the years have done is to throw themselves into it, to glean information from anyone and everyone, just take it all in, offer their services for free so that they're getting. I mean, imagine if you were going to sit down with any high professional in any industry and say, teach me everything you know. Can I just shadow you? And they not charge you for that. The mindset is, God, I'll turn that thing around and recognize what you're getting by being able to do these things for them is so much training for free. So good for you for doing that. Yeah.
Well, and the relationship of the currency of time. An agent that's starting in the business has so much time to give, and an
Yes.
agent who's successful has so little time. And if you can expend your currency of time for that broker, that is just, it's huge.
Yeah. That's super huge. I love that. That's great. When you started, I mean, I know that there's probably been influencers along the way, but can you think of a couple of people that you said, oh man, they really influenced my career?
Yes, Andover and Carol Burns. Andover stood me up in her office and walked me down a path and behind the chairs. And she was like, you've got to learn to walk the right way. And I was like, what?
Okay.
And she said, you have to carry yourself. You have to present. You have to show up and you have to present. And she kind of taught me like the difference between, this is going to sound funny, but the way you show up in Bellevue looks different than the way you show up in Seattle. It's a totally different market. And she said, you have to understand who your audience is. And she never said you have to fake anything, but, and I believe this is a psychological or sales tactic, but it's the mirroring of someone. You mirror their cadence, you mirror their volume. She told me I was too loud. I'm probably being too loud on your podcast. And
No, that's not good.
and I will find
That's funny
myself doing that in a conversation with a really quiet client
as you bring it down. Yeah.
where you listen and you slow your cadence down. I tend to be like a border collie that wants to, I dog type people, Jennifer. So Heather
I
Berger,
love
my
it.
former partner, will tell you all about that. But I tend to be a little too wound up. That's my morning coffee and my personality type. But mirroring people and then understanding who your audience is. And I've talked to other, top producing agents in my office, and we are chameleons. That is what we are. We're actors. Actually, I don't know if you listen to the podcast Smartless. It's awesome. And they frequently talk about interviewing for roles in movies. And I'm like, that is us. That is what we do. Every time we meet a
That's
buyer or a
true.
seller, that is what we do.
It's true. There is a level of performance, and I want to be clear about this because this isn't inauthentic. It's us showing up and being good at reading people with the goal and intent of making connection so that we can help them get where they want to go. So this isn't about manipulation. This isn't about trying to become something you're not. It's about becoming really good at saying, "Who are you? I want to meet you in such a way where you feel comfortable and trust me so I can help you because I'm really good at what I do. But in order for you to know that I'm good at what I do, I have to figure out who you are and meet you where you are." And that's skill, that's practice, that's hours and hours. And sometimes failing, walking away from a listing appointment saying, which I did not that long ago, unfortunately, I missed the mark. I could tell when I walked away that I didn't create that connection. Luckily, they came back around on the buyer side because they're like, "We think we like you. We're not sure." I made some mistake of saying something was jerry rigged because there was a popsicle stick holding up a part of a microwave handle. And I was like, "Well, that's kind of funny, jerry rigged." He goes, "Well, that's what I did. I fixed that." And it was the dad. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I just absolutely messed up." And I was like, "No, I meant like Jerry, my dad's no, it was done. It was over."
We fail, Jennifer, and even successful agents fail. It happens. And we learning from the failures. That's the golden nugget there, right? Is that we learned. And however old we are, as many decades along as we are, which is very few, we still have those moments. One of my sayings, well, I said it to you earlier, is she who dies with the most information wins. I was working with a client whose wife had cancer and I didn't know it. And I said that to him. And he just stopped. And I'm like, oh God, we have to check ourselves all the time. And we can't not be us, right? Going back to your point about authenticity or being genuine, what I say to people doesn't change. Like I don't tell someone something that is different than fundamentally what I believe. I'm not going to tell one seller that they need to do something one way and another seller to do something another way just because I think they want to hear that. I'm going to tell everyone, but the delivery is different. And then getting through to that person and making them understand that I am trustworthy and that I really have their best interest at heart is what is important. So I could not agree with you more.
I'm going to just beat a dead horse for one more second here and then we'll move on. And that's to say, anybody that's listening to this that has any relationship, a parent, a child, a partner, you absolutely navigate that relationship by figuring out how to connect with them. And that is no different than what we do in real estate. So, right, I know how to approach my mom about a topic that's differently than how I approach my dad. I haven't changed, but I certainly know how, right, I'm going to approach it because of who they are. So, implement those same skills, but in real estate. So, you told your husband you're going to jump, and he's like, "How are you going to, what? We're not going to pay the bills. What are you doing?" When did you say, "Hey, honey, look at me. We're actually more than paying the bills"? When did it sort of turn the corner to say, "I'm going to be okay. I'm going to make enough to sustain our family"?
This is such a funny story because it happened the day I brought my first child home from the hospital.
Wow.
And so my husband and I very consciously decided to have a child. And it was 5 years after we got married. And that's a whole other story that I won't get into. If anybody wants to call me and ask, I'll tell them. Love telling stories. I'm Irish. We literally came home from the hospital with this brand new baby after, a few days in the hospital. I was home for maybe a couple days and he had taken some time off work. He was working in downtown Seattle and he made a good living. He was in high tech staffing and placement. And it was a fine time to be in that. He was not a technology worker, he was adjacent. But we kind of looked at each other and we were like, okay, who's going to take care of this kid? I had been doing real estate on my own then for, 5 years at that point. I was like, I can't see giving up my job. I love what I do. I took a stack of files to the hospital with me. At the time, we had files. And, Glenn says, I mean, that's my husband. He laughs. He's like, "Oh, you were on the phone on your like rotary phone giving, talking to people." Cause I was a couple weeks early and I was like, no, 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 I have
Not
transactions I have
yet.
to finish. So we basically got home and I was like, well, one of us is going to have to stay home with this kid. And he was like, "I'll do it." And I went, "Oh my gosh, really? Like, is that what we're going to do?" And he's like, "You have enough to sustain us." It was 2003. So it was not the height of, it's 3, 4. It was the end of 2003. So 99 to 2004 was kind of the on my own. And actually, we were living in Kitsap County, Jennifer. We had moved from that West Seattle house to be closer to his family. And I was transacting in both markets. So I literally had to get like hop on a ferry to go pick up a fax at the office.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
it wasn't even a decision for us. I was like, I love my job. My husband was happy to do this. He quit in about, 3 weeks. And That was it. It was sink or swim. At that point, I was the primary breadwinner from that point forward. Getting into the downturn is a whole other thing because I had another child in February of 2007, right before Bear Stearns went under, and we had moved back to the city. We made a conscious decision in 2005 that I was going to be much more successful and the numbers were better in Seattle than in Kitsap County. And rurally, there are still kind of some things, some nuances to the market that are, I won't say it's less professional. It's just a different mindset. And I still transact over here. And actually, I say over here because I'm in Gig Harbor right now.
Oh, okay, nice.
But that was the turning point. And then things got really tough through the downturn.
Any broker that has gone through what you are referring to, both you and I did. I got licensed, I've been 23 years, whatever, 2002. If you've made it through that recession and still are doing real estate, I think we should have a patch or some sort of medal that we wear in our right to tell people, hey, if you made it through that, there's some grit there.
Pocket Hours is brought to you by Scout Real Estate. Hi, I'm Jennifer Nelson, owner at Scout Real Estate. I started this firm with the vision of doing things differently, with our focus on legendary service for our clients and creating a community of producing agents to spur each other to do higher quality work. If you are interested in learning more about how a small group of like-minded brokers have come together to have some fun while doing a lot of business, reach out to me, 206-227-7966, or email jennifer@scoutrealestate.com. I promise you this, fun is a high priority for me, but so is winning. So if you appreciate those two things, you might be interested in Scout. Looking forward to hearing from you.
I want to transition just a little bit to say, what do you think, if you could say the top 3 things that you do that you think are making the difference in you having consistent income in real estate? What do you think those are?
For someone like me who is a social introvert, I'll tell you the first thing, and it's so simple and silly, and I've always done it. And I don't know if it is true. I've never been able to measure this, but I will tell you that since I've done it, I've always had the phone calls. The pipeline has always filled over time. And it's a silly calendar that I send out every year. It's not like a generic calendar that I send out that Windermere produced, or this is like a foundation calendar or a thing you stick on the dashboard of your car. It's actually something that I put thought into, and I have a printer print, and then I send it out with a thank you card at the end of every year, beginning of the new year. And I think honestly, people put that silly calendar on their wall. And I say silly, it's usually pretty and it's been elaborate some years, sent it out with like hangers and the same, but it's a monthly touch point that I don't have to go back to. And for years, Heather and I sent out the Seattle magazine. We sent people copies of that. Then kind of people started going like, too much recycling. Don't send me this magazine anymore. We stopped, but the calendar I've continued to do every single year. So I think that is number 1. And then number 2 is just staying in the flow with people. There's all these ninja principles that you can follow to the T. And if you do that, I'm sure you'll be successful. And I am not that disciplined, to be frank. When you get to a point in your career where you're kind of like, I liken it to like those marathon runners that those tall, skinny, like 60-year-old people that just know how to run a marathon. Their bodies dynamically know how to do that. That's where I think I am in real estate. Like my body just knows how to do this. And my family has been trained, right? They're my support system and they know how to do this. And they're like, when mom walks away from the dinner table with a phone to her ear, she's, taking an important call. But I would say that ninja principle, going back to just staying in contact with people, even when I don't want to, like, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the holidays and you're tired and you have too much on your plate and you've had a great year and you're just like, I would love to take a 3-month break. It's never going to happen. That's when you have to dig in and make sure that you're, saying hi to people via text. I do not like phone calls. Sounds funny, but we spend so much time on the phone.
That's true.
That's, picking up the phone to like call to see how someone is. First of all, it feels disingenuous to me. But when I drive by a client's house, I text them and I go, hey, I just saw your peonies are about to bloom. and your place looks great. Have you painted? So that is just huge, just staying in contact with people. And then I used to play a lot of tennis because I was an athlete in college. I don't play a lot of tennis anymore, but I have a book club that we started over 20 years ago. And I will say that I can trace, 80% of my business back to that Power Chicks book club that we started. It was 2005 when I had my first son. And I think I was the only woman in the book club that had a child. So I would say that just staying in contact with people, it doesn't have to be a personal handwritten note. It doesn't have to be an unsolicited market analysis of your house. It's really just staying top of mind with people. And then that principle of the ninja, where it's like, I don't have to remind people that I'm in real estate. And I know when I was earlier in my career, it probably came up more. And it's okay to talk about it if somebody brings it up. But I have such an aversion to solicitation.
And I just want to say out loud for the listeners too that what I like about this is that it's such a balance. So for you that are in this industry that are new, having that balance of a touch point that is expected by your clients because it's consistent. And that calendar that you're speaking of is something that you do every year and that you don't just quit because you don't get something out of it, which I think a lot of new agents are. Wait a minute, this isn't working after 3 months. I'm going to ditch it and try the next thing. I'm going to buy these leads. I'm going to, do this and that, and the other. And you're like, no, 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 hold, stay the course, because this is what eventually people start to rely on that. And then they do that, for our company, it's the pie party every year. And we have tons of people show up and they count on it, right? They know they're going to get their pie for Thanksgiving. That's the kind of thing we want to do. I also think that a lot of real estate agents, surprisingly, we expect them to all be extroverts because we think, right, this is that job, or people that get along with people and can be in a group. Many of the high producers that I've interviewed are not extroverts at all.
And slightly socially awkward, right? Like,
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, if you want to hire a good agent, look for the one who's not the queen of the room. It's interesting what you said is do what comes naturally to you. And that authenticity is going to come through. And people that like you because of who you are going to be drawn to you, which is what we want. We want the people that say, hey, Shawna's my kind of people. I'd like to work with her. I trust her. I feel like what she does and how she does it is how I want it to be done. And if you're trying to be the other person that you think you need to be in order to get business, you're going to fall flat on your face.
agreed. It's disingenuous. I always say there's different strokes for different folks. If you're good at an open house, you are successful at that. You're going to attract people that want that. Whereas I am not fit for human consumption at an open house. I have like resting bitch face and I can't interact with people. I get really upset when people touch things and ask me stupid questions.
Probably not the best place for you to be.
No, it is not the best place for me to be. But that's okay because the people that I attract are the people that are like me. The genuineness of being who you are is really what will attract clients to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Before we get into sort of some interesting things going on in our industry, which I asked you before we started if we could talk about, I want to just ask you one other question around how you balance sort of keeping the pipeline coming, which I know is some of the things you just talked about. But is there anything else you would add? Because I know part of our business is that brokers get busy helping buyers or sellers and they forget about doing the work that sort of generates the next buyer or seller that they can help. How do you balance that in your daily life?
I had a conversation recently with another top producing agent. And, we're talking about people that are not, we have savings, like we're so different than we were 20 years ago in the downturn. But I think there's that muscle memory of what that feels like to not have money coming in. There is never not going to be an ebb and a flow to this business. It's never going to be, oh, I consistently sold 3 houses a month for 36 a year, and that happened over 5 years. It is never going to look like that. And so just doing a little bit over time, even if you're super busy and you've got 6 closings in a couple of weeks and you're like, oh, I'm not reaching out to people, just do a little bit, do something. It's progress over perfection is, another one of my mantras. Like, it's really hard for me to give up the control of being perfect. I am a control freak. Lots of good agents are type A control freaks, but we can also be like casual, messy people, right? It's not being a control freak doesn't mean your life looks perfect. Being a control freak just means the things that are most important need to happen a certain way for you to feel like you did the best job possible. But just taking little steps, even when you're tired and you've had a 12-hour day or a 90-hour week, and you're like, I have nothing left. I'm scheduling a walk with a friend who is, a casual buyer, looker. And I'm not doing it because I want to, make her feel good about me. I'm doing it because I know I have to step out of transactional stuff for a minute just to like take a breath. And that's it. That's my one thing this week that I will do that isn't directly related to buying or selling a house right now.
I love that. And I just want to say that again, do something. Just do. I love that you said that. Progress over perfection. I know all of us, even the new people, you finish your day and you're like, I don't know what I did. Look back and look at the one thing you did. The one thing I did is send a text about the peonies that are, blooming in the yard when I drove by. Great. Check it. That's it. Keep that going and it will produce over time. I love that. Let's transition a little bit now, which I'm super excited to hear your thoughts on this, but I don't think it's any surprise to the listeners about sort of what's happened. But let me recap a little bit to say Compass Real Estate, their CEO has made a stance to say we would like to have exclusive listings, meaning a seller could decide to not bring their listing to the Northwest Multiple Listing Service and list it for the public, but instead it would be on the Compass site instead for people to come there and try it out as a trial. And then they can decide from there if they want to list it publicly. And there's been a lot of opinion about that, but I'm really interested, John. I know you wrote an article about this, but tell us sort of your thoughts on this thing that's happening right now.
Well, I will first and foremost say that I deeply adore the majority, if not all, of my Compass colleagues, even the ones that I disagree on this stance with. There's very few people in this world that I don't respect. If you get to that level in my book, something must have gone incredibly awry. I do respect all of my colleagues. I do not respect the position that Compass is taking, and I don't respect it because I think on a very just a simple, very objective perspective, you are giving people the opportunity to violate fair housing. You are promoting the opportunity to violate fair housing. And I started in this business long enough to know how far we've come just in the last 3 decades on that one. And I think there's arguments that have been floating around. A lot of people didn't really dig into what these arguments were. And they were saying things like, well, your company does a lot of off-market sales. True. And I think there's a lot of other companies that do off-market sales. And I'm not saying that there weren't things that were objectively wrong with that. And I'm not saying there aren't times when that makes the most sense. 2 weeks ago, I closed a transaction that was an off-market sale because my neighbor came to me and said, my neighbor to the south is going to sell her house. We had cocktails. She would like to sell it to me. Will you represent me as an agent in navigating this transaction? I had nothing to do, nor did the listing broker. Thank goodness it was a broker I knew, nor did he have anything to do with those people organically coming together and saying they want to buy and sell this house. That is the absolute reason why that SUL designation should happen. There are certain people who are going through a divorce and they do not want to publicly list their house, or there's security reasons. You probably know this. I have a $33 million listing in Medina right now. And we were very reticent to put that listing on the market because it's a security risk for them to have their house on the market. So there are reasons. In that piece that I wrote, I said, we have all, to some extent, been violating our own MLS's regulations on this. I am going to raise my hand and say I am not beyond reproach here. And I'm going to admit that. But we can all be better about it. At the end of the day, what Compass is trying to do, there's an article written by Mr. Revkin. It was an interview. I want to state this perfectly correctly. He was interviewed by a reporter at Real Estate News. And in February, he said simply and straightforward that their move to this 3-phase marketing strategy with the private exclusive was designed to capture market share. It wasn't designed for a seller to have a better opportunity to sell their house. And even in the lawsuit that you look at where Compass filed against the MLS, in his own words, he actually says, If the property goes on the MLS and isn't prepared and priced perfectly, then the seller may suffer. Well, then I go, okay, why aren't we preparing and pricing perfectly? That's our job. That is our job to do this. In this argument, and again, this is nuanced, I personally don't have a problem with coming soons, but a coming soon means that an agent or a buyer is made aware that there's a property upcoming so that their buyer can track that and be ready for it or prepared for it. And those are the instances when, hey, a seller in my neighborhood is going to get their house ready to go on the market. I have buyers who are asking me, when am I going to see good houses? And I'm like, hey, this is coming soon. You're not able to show that property and you're not able to sell it off market. But this whole private exclusive, that's the only part of this that I have this really serious problem with, because it is truly, and this is, I know, related pocket hours, it's a pocket listing.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I did when the Compass agent said, your company made a stance against this private exclusive and you guys do a lot of off-market sales. And I'm like, but those are two different things. It's completely two different things. And so there was a lot of ambiguity around the arguments that were being made about this private exclusive. And I went online. That person said to me, your kids could go and see these private exclusives. And I was like, really? So I went online and tried to get through to the private exclusives that were being marketed in our area. And you can't without working with a Compass agent. So I think there was misinformation given to the agents that work for Compass about what it actually was. But at the end of the day, in Robert Refkin's own words, this was designed to capture market share. They are a publicly traded company. And my understanding is they have not been profitable to their shareholders yet. They're spending a lot of money. And I adore, like I said, Compass's black and white marketing, I think is awesome. Like, I love how some of my colleagues are marketing things. But at the end of the day, this hurts our industry. This hurts the clients, the consumer, the seller, and the buyer. It hurts them because it doesn't publicly expose a listing to the market. And if you look at simple supply and demand economics, it simply makes sense to expose something in the best possible way to the most amount of people. And I think some agents will say, well, there's an argument that maybe they don't want the most amount of money. And I think those are perfect examples of why our MLS gives us options to not market something on an IDX feed, for example, or to not include information about the property. Is it damaging to that seller? By the word damaging, yes, they may be getting less money, but that is their choice. So right now, a seller does have choice, because the argument's been made, this is all about seller choice. They do have a choice, but we are a clearinghouse for information. And if we go to a private silo of listings for all of these companies, I mean, look at it. Windermere would crush market share wise, right? But it would also eliminate the Scout real estates of the world, the ensemble real estates of the world, the real, not real as in the backward L real, but the NWG group. I mean, how are they going to? So what, we're going to form a little private MLS on this side that services those companies. How is that serving the public? There's no argument where you're going to convince me it is.
Yeah, agreed. It's interesting to me too that in talking with lots of Compass agents, which I want to say again, I love that you said that already. I have great relationships with awesome agents at Compass, and they've been very interesting conversations because, to be honest, a lot of them are very, very upset with the direction the CEO is taking it and feel like they're having to make some difficult decisions on whether to stay at the company because of it. And then there's other ones that are sort of trying to back it and wrap their mind around it and have an argument. But at the end of the day, no one wins if one company holds the tie. This is true in any industry. This isn't just real estate. This monopoly, this sort of feeling that we have to go to Compass's website to find our house, or we have to work with a Compass agent because then we'll get the most access to the most properties, means that one company controls this whole thing. That is just anti everything, specifically sellers and buyers, but also just that we don't want a world where we live that way. I mean, I'm mad at Comcast every day because they hold they hold too much power, in my opinion, right? We want there to be competition for a good reason so that no one company has all the power. I loved all your points. I will just say that I'm disappointed, especially after what we have just gone through, to say that we're about transparency in the NAR lawsuit. Did I say that right? I always say NRA. No,
It's
no, it's not the Rifle Association. I mess that up every time.
NAR.
Thank you. And so sort of trying to tout that and say, man, we went through this whole thing to say we want everyone to be transparent. We want to talk about what we do. We want to sort of revise people's opinion of real estate agents as trying to hide any sort of compensation or, pull one over on them. And then we have this come up in the news, and I'm like, no,
I
make it
know.
stop. It doesn't help our industry of distrust that already exists. It will be interesting to see what happens with this. I think what I understand, and maybe you can help me if you know differently, is that they did start to post these, and then MLS said, nope, we're going to stop your feed. And then they stopped posting them. And now there's a lawsuit saying, MLS, Compass said, MLS, you stopped us from having the most exposure, which MLS then said, wait, isn't this what you were doing by having exclusive listening? So we'll see where this lawsuit lands. My hope is that it doesn't go anywhere and that all the companies sort of back up to say, keep doing it the way we've been doing it.
Our MLS, our little corner of the country, is the proving ground for not CCP as defined by NAR, but truly a marketplace that exposes all listings. And I will say, Jennifer, it's interesting. We in the MLS, in the Northwest MLS, operate very differently than many other parts of the country. And we operate differently than many other parts of the country regarding last year's DOJ settlement, too. And we publish compensation. And basically, if the NWMLS wins this lawsuit, it will be a shift potentially in the rest of the country. And so basically, the rest of the country has already gone the other direction. They've allowed this to happen. They've allowed the private exclusives to happen because they had these regulations that allowed a coming soon, which allowed Compass to say, we're going to do the private exclusive. And there's other companies that have done it too. So this is not just Compass. It's just that they made a big marketing play for it. And they wanted to push our MLS into the same category. And our NWMLS, Justin Haig said, no, we believe in this and we're going to stick to it. And so it will really be a shift that the rest of the country may have to adopt. And it's a David and Goliath situation. It really is, because it is bigger than just our MLS. But I truly believe that I am on the right side of this. And I've heard all the arguments and I have listened. And there's people that I genuinely respect that feel differently than I do. But I know where I stand on it.
I will say too that there's a part of me that feels like a seller that gets hoodwinkled, and I really do believe that, into believing that it benefits them to try it first as a private exclusive. In my opinion, and I've said this to Compass agents, and they, some agree, some don't. If that does not make me feel confident that my agent knows what they're doing. So one of the arguments is, well, we need to test the market. Well, no, you need to do more research to figure out your comps and price it according to the market. I'm going to go back to this hoodwinkle part, is to say, there is no industry anywhere where I know that they say, let's get a limited exposure to this, and that will give us insight then to go big exposure. It doesn't work that way, right? Let's do all of this work ahead of time to price it and prep it and get it ready for market. And then because we've studied the market, we then know how to put it out for maximum exposure to get you the most money. That's not just real estate. That's all kinds of other industries. So I get a little protective of the seller that gets this line and buys it to say, see, we're keeping you off market. When, to your point and to the CEO's very words, that's not at all what this is about. This is about them capturing more business, having people come to their website, only working with Compass agents, and then in-house sales over and over and over again. And that doesn't in the least bit represent a seller's best interests. I guess that makes me a little angry, to be honest, about the pulling the wool over the eyes of some people that say, oh, that sounds interesting. Yeah, let's try that. Instead of saying, no, that's not in your best interest at all.
Well, and we come as trusted real estate advisors. The first word there is trust. People trust us. The general population does not necessarily know any better. So when they are fed this option, we know some of our colleagues are incredibly good salespeople and orators and convincers of arguments. And following the logic of what you just said, it doesn't make any sense. And P.S., we all get price opinions if we're stumped about how to price a property. And those price opinions I usually get are from agents from other companies. I ask Compass agents and Coldwell Banker agents and John L. Scott agents to give me a price opinion. And by the way, testing the market with a smaller buyer pool who is not interested in telling you what your property is worth aside from their own opinion, which is conversely different than yours.
Yes, yes.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's like logically, this doesn't make any sense. Again, we all took economics in high school, I think. And this is a simple economic principle that you expose it to the most amount of people in the market to get the best data. There's always going to be the exception. There's always going to be the house that has the thing that might mean the market won't bear it. But that doesn't mean that a buyer won't love it. Again, going back to our initial conversation, this is about emotion. Real estate is about emotion and feeling good about a place you want to live. So you're right. There's no other commodity that people treat this way. It does get very personal. It gets personal for us because we care for our clients, and it's personal for their clients because it's the home they live in. But at the end of the day, you're completely spot on. It's disingenuous for people to be told that this is a better way of doing this. It's not. There may be certain situations in which it makes sense, but those are so few and far between. And there are accommodations for that. And there should be exceptions for that. I get it. The woman who has been battered, who does not want her house publicly listed, there should be a way to do this. But tucking your house away in a private silo of listings for a very small percentage of agents to see it first is not the way to help that woman get out of her financial distress because she needs to sell her house and relocate.
Exactly, exactly. I think I'm okay in saying this, and if I'm not, we'll have to edit it later. But I was talking to Scott Monroe, and he just had a listing not long ago, right after this happened. He said, had I had this on a Windermere only site, my seller would have made $150,000 less than what we ended up selling it for. Because if I look at just the Windermere agents that offered compared to the outside of Windermere agent that actually won, this is what it would have cost my seller to have done that. And so the examples are everywhere to say, we want everyone to know about this house so that the seller gets the best opportunity. Well, thank you. Thank you for your comments on that and your candor. And I appreciate your, I mean, 30 years in, you should have a lot to say about this, and you know how it works. So it's good to hear from you. Just in conclusion, I'd love, Shawna, for you to say, what do you think with interest rates and sort of tariffs and all the junk going on right now? Where do you think the rest of this market's going to go? If you were to say, here's what I think is going to happen for the remainder of 2025, what would that look like?
It's always a new year, right? That's part of why we do this is it's, we always get the fresh, the new, the unexpected. We're all adrenaline junkies because we like the unknown, flying over the edge of the roller coaster. I feel like people are going to transact. I mean, I go back to my husband says this all the time to me. He's like my wonderful confidant, but he always says, Shawna, people will always have to buy and sell houses. There is no world in which everything will shut down. I mean, all at once. I mean, we had a test case, right? We had COVID and clearly it didn't shut anybody down.
That's true.
I mean, it did for like 3 or 4 days, but
yeah, real estate boomed during COVID. Yeah.
I think we had this beginning of the year that almost felt like we compressed a 6-month early Q1, Q2 into like 3 months. And it was February, March, and April. And then everyone kind of expected for people to come back after spring break and get excited about real estate again. And it's been hit or miss. It's been a really kind of slow month. So I think we're headed into a slower cycle for the rest of the year. I mean, the last few years have been kind of a terrible Q3, Q4 with elongation of market times and, prices compressing. I mean, I don't see it any different. I think the whole economic uncertainty moment that we're in right now with tariffs, and I think people have kind of gotten over interest rates for the most part. I think it more has to do with affordability and the fact that our housing costs are so high. I'm hearing colleagues of mine recently within the last couple of days who are like, who would have thunk that I got multiple offers on a Lake City condo at 300,000 and I'm not getting multiple offers on a Ravenna house for 1.2. So, in what world is that happening? And it's affordability. People are having to change their mindset about what they can live in and live in longer term. I'm also seeing first time buyers that forewent, I don't know what the word is there. They skipped the process of buying the first house or the first condo, and they've gone straight to like their forever home, which is a really interesting model because they're buying pretty expensive houses, but they're anticipating having children in them, raising children in them, and then having grandchildren in them. And they're in their 20s and 30s. That's, bigger picture, that's happening. People are staying in their houses so much longer. I mean, I say this as a very long in the tooth agent at this point, or broker. I'm kind of looking forward to separating the wheat from the chaff with the agents who got into this thinking it's an easy business. I think there's some really, really amazing mid-tier brokers that are, they're attorneys, they have accounting backgrounds, they're super business oriented. They run their business like a business, and they are so successful. And that's the up and coming next generation top producers. It's humbling to see how well they do their business. So that is not me. You can see I'm in, my pajamas I'm drinking my third cup of coffee. That's not them. But so anyway, I know I got outside of this year, but I don't think this is going to be a spectacular, end of the year. I think it's going to be a grind. And I think that the next 3 years are probably going to be a grind while this current administration keeps, throwing our economic security around like it's a toy to be played with. I think it's going to be tough. But at the end of the day, people have to buy and sell houses. So I think it's going to be a lot more of the mandatory moves, the death, divorce, and relocation. And then, those picky buyers who definitely want a deal because they're paying a high interest rate to get something.
Agreed. Wow, that was an awesome summary. Thank you. That's really good. And it is interesting to me that you touched on a couple things, but I love that you're saying, like your husband is saying, people do need to buy and sell, and that's just going to be true for forever. And so it's going to be the agents that understand the market and are able to meet people where they are, and also who continue to do the grind, who are gritty, who sort of dig in. And to your point, I think the people that are like, oh, it's so easy to make money in real estate are going to be finding other jobs. And that's great for us too, because it sort of helps those that are serious about this stay in and have success. But I also think it's funny. We just talked in our brokerage about the inventory has gone up significantly, right? And then we look last year, and it's interesting that even with all this inventory, some homes are still sitting, and buyers are pickier, and people are saying, "Gosh, the interest rate's better, so I'm in the market." But some people are sitting on 3% interest rate on their house, and they're like, "I'm not touching it," right? So what we used to have is sort of a regular flow of people selling and buying has definitely shifted and has impacted our market. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. This has been super fun to talk to you, and I'm so glad I circled back and we got to do this, and I appreciate your time. And I took a bunch of notes, and I'm hoping that we're going to get this out in the next month to have people hear it because it's so relevant to what's happening right now. But I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, Jennifer, thank you for having me. This felt like I was sitting at in my living room with a glass of wine, having a great conversation with a friend. So
That's what I'm hoping for. And it was, and we are. Maybe
awesome.
not wine.
Yeah.
It's 10 in the morning, but if that works for you, go ahead and do it.
Yeah. You do you.
That's right. All right. Well, I'll see you out in the field. And thanks again, Shawna.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for listening into Pocket Hours. I hope this has been interesting, fun, made you laugh, made you think, spurred you on to do and implement some new things in your business. I appreciate your time and hope this has been a good use of it, period. Now, go be the agent you would hire.